Wing isn't just bad, it's terrible. It's a tragedy, but I am so glad that I read this book. Let me explain. I have been so excited to make this video. Like, I have been vibrating with excitement over talking about this incredibly terrible book. And that's because it's really, really fun. Please understand me here. Fourth Wing is a really tragically bad book for so many reasons, and we are going to get into it. But at no point was I bored by it, and I really think that's an important thing to talk about here. When I think back to my attempts at reading Twilight and A Court of Thorns and Roses, something that those two books have in common is the fact that they're both really boring, and I was so surprised by that when I read them because, yeah, I knew those books were going to be bad. I knew that I wasn't going to enjoy them, but what I didn't know, what I wasn't prepared for, was the fact that they were boring, that their characters are cardboard and uninteresting, that the events in those books are basically non-existent, that the dialogue and interpersonal relationships between the characters are so lifeless. There's nothing interesting or exciting going on in those books. That's what confuses me so much about why people are so obsessed with Twilight and A Court of Thorns and Roses and have been for so long now. They're boring. Fourth Wing is not boring. It is so entertaining from beginning to end. So if you're someone who loves this book, I understand why. Because although it is actually terrible, I was consistently entertained from page 1. And kudos to the editor. This thing is so tightly written and so perfectly paced. You won't be bored. You can't be bored. It's too entertaining and too consistent in its entertainment. This book never has the audacity to bore you like those other two books do. This thing is so much fun, but it is hilariously terrible as well. I laughed all the way through. It is so funny in how bad it is. Rebecca Yarros really knows how to entertain, although actually I don't think she does because at no point is anything in here that I laughed at supposed to actually be funny, but it's really f***ing hilarious. I made so many notes on my phone as I was reading this, so I'm going to go through all of those notes and just share my reading experience with you. Up to a point, because I still don't want to spoil anything. I also want to make it clear that I bought this book secondhand for like £4, because I don't know Yarros's politics, but I've seen a lot of people talking online about, is she the kind of person you should really be supporting? It's kind of unclear, but from her bio in this book, I do know that she's obsessed with American military stuff. It specifically says she loves military heroes and has been blissfully married to hers for over 20 years. I don't like the idea of financially supporting someone who has such a big boner for the American military, so I got this secondhand just in case. Anyway, let's dig in. So to kick us off, we've got two countries that are at war. That'll do for the world building. That's all we get. There's a continent, there are two countries, they've been at war for centuries. Who knows why? Who cares? Rebecca Yarros thinks that that's enough to build a world, right? It's only a fantasy book with an entirely freshly imagined world that spawned from her brain. Who cares about the details? There are two countries, they border each other, and they don't like each other. What, you want context? You want some lore, some history, some geographical details? No, f*** you. These two countries, they don't like each other. Get a grip. So our protagonist, Violet, is the daughter of the head of a military academy. This academy trains people to be healers, scribes, infantry, and people who fly around on dragons looking cool. And Violet is very peaceful and bookish and meek and introverted, except when she's not, and we'll get to that. And she wanted to be a scribe, but her mum rode the dragons, and her sister rides the dragons, and her dead brother rode the dragons, so she's got to ride a dragon. And she's gonna look cool doing it, probably, even though she's just a meek little bookish introvert, except when she's not. So off she goes to join the group of people that fly on the dragons. But in order to do that, the first test is that every potential candidate who wants to ride a dragon has to cross a very dangerous and narrow divide. They have to cross a parapet with a very dangerous wind blowing them, and if they fall, they will die, they will fall to their deaths. And I have to admit, this was a very exciting moment. Like, Violet is standing at the edge of death, and she needs to cross to safety. She meets a guy and a girl at this moment. They kind of exchange names and pleasantries. She makes it across, obviously. So does the other girl. The guy, whose name we've just learned, ends up falling to his death. It's pretty dramatic. But this all happens on page 27, and in order to get herself across, she gives us exposition. She out loud tells us a few scant details about the history of her country and this lengthy war between their country and that other country. It's like half a page of exposition. It is nothing. It is not valuable. But this is how Rebecca Yarros chooses to do exposition, by having her protagonist just talk out loud some vague details about the history of her world to distract herself as she makes it across this deathly chasm. It's so funny. And this is what I mean. I was never bored. How can you be... The next note I have is that she identifies people by their cool hair and their unique eyes, like their anime characters. It's like the guy with the cool black, long black hair and the girl with the flame red hair. It's just... That's all we get. I can't. She can't. So you get the cool hair person and the cool eyes person and the cool hair and cool eyes person, and they're probably the best of all the people. And Fourth Wing is the most entertaining book I have ever read in my life. Okay, but one thing that is genuinely so cringe all the way through the book is where Yarros chooses to put the word f. That word is sprinkled all the way through the book, constantly. But it's always in the wrong places. It always feels a little bit cringe. And it makes me think that, like, she doesn't know how to use the word f. Like, at some point recently, just before choosing to write the book, she heard about this naughty word. She knows it's bad. People have told her it's a bad word. And so she's just put it in where she thinks she's supposed to, like a child. It never fits right, and it's always a bit cringe and weird. The idea that an adult who has children of her own isn't adept at properly using the word f***, for some reason it makes my skin crawl. My next note says, everything is repeated. The book could have been half the length. For example, in the opening chapters, characters remark multiple times on who Violet is, her nepotism, her family name, her mother, etc., etc. Her surname, by the way, is Sorengale. Do you get it? Like Soaring Gale. She thought that was so clever. And so every time she's like, I'm Violet Sorengale, and they're like, oh my god, that's Sorengale? The woman that runs our academy, Sorengale? Your sister is a legend, oh my god, this, that, the other. Over and over and over again. It's at this point you see how much of a self-insert character she is for the author. Because you can sort of feel the author's head and heart and ego expand. It's like, yeah, she's so important, she's so cool, and she's so brave, and everyone knows who her family is. She's so important. Oh my god, everyone thinks she's the best thing ever. Oh, she's the best thing ever. I'm the best thing ever. Oh my god, this book is incredible. I'm incredible. You can feel it all expanding. Oh yeah, and before she gets on the parapet over and over again, her sister takes her there and just keeps saying, don't die. Don't die. Remember, you can't die. Promise me you won't die. Don't die. It sounds like it's supposed to be banter, but it's not. Okay, so you've got two countries that are at war, but there was also a rebellion faction that rose up for some reason because there was something they wanted. They were rebels. Who needs any more detail than that? We don't know what they wanted. We don't know what their cause was. We only know that they were rebels that rose up. And they were defeated by the government, the military, whatever. Who cares? Details, just details. And as punishment, all of the children of the rebel leaders had to enlist in the military. And so you've got this kid called Zaden. Zaden is dangerous. He's the love interest, but when we first meet him, to the book's credit, he is described as a pretty scary guy, and for the first few dozen pages, he's really intimidating. He hates Violet with a passion because her mum killed his dad and his brother killed her sister. Loads of bad blood in the family, right? And he's a scary, dangerous guy, but this is how he's first described on page 20. He's tall, with wind-blown black hair and dark brows. The line of his jaw is strong and covered by a warm, tawny skin and dark stubble. And when he folds his arms across his torso, the muscles in his chest and arms ripple, moving in a way that makes me swallow. And his eyes are the shade of gold-flecked onyx. The contrast is startling, jaw-dropping even. Everything about him is. His features are so harsh that they look carved, and yet they're astonishingly perfect. Like an artist worked a lifetime sculpting him, and at least a year of that was spent on his mouth. He's the most exquisite man I've ever seen. These words, perfect and exquisite, are used over and over all the way through the book in lieu of any actual description. Obviously, we had loads of detail there, but once that detail is out of the way, he's just perfect. That's it. He's perfect. Over and over again, she talks about his perfect lips and his perfect eyes, and everything's just perfect. What does that look like? I don't know, it's perfect, obviously. It's whatever Yaros thinks is perfect. And living in the War College means I've seen a lot of men. Even the diagonal scar that bisects his eyebrow and marks the top corner of his cheek only makes him hotter. Flaming hot. Scorching hot. Gets you in trouble and you like it level of hot. And this is the moment where her name gets repeated so much. She meets this girl called Rhiannon, who's like, are you ready for this, Soaring Gale? And then all the way through the next page, there's so much exposition about who she is and her name and his name and the fact that she's fragile and meek and little and bookish and... Where's the bit? Where's the bit? Your mother captured my father and oversaw his execution. Yeah? Well, your father killed my brother, so it seems like we're even. So you've got, you know, they hate each other, blah, blah, blah. It's awful. All the way through the first 50 pages or so, this guy Zaden is described as someone who is genuinely dangerous. Like, he intimidates her. Every time he walks towards her, she gets the sense that he wants to kill her based on the look on his face and his gait and how quickly he's moving, and she literally runs away from him for her own safety. This guy is dangerous and he wants to hurt her. But even so, you know, he's a bad boy and he's hot and she knows that, and that's really all that matters, you know? So what if he's abusive and threatening and dangerous? Doesn't matter, he's really hot. And that's when we get lines like on page 47 when she says, there's a fucking smirk on Zaden's arrogant, handsome face. Like, that line has it all. On page 87, she accidentally overhears a group of these children of rebel leaders gathering in a forest and chatting with each other about being rebels or whatever. And Violet gets jealous because Zaden is chatting to a girl. Jealous that the dangerous guy who wants to kill her is chatting to a dangerous girl who wants to kill her. Slowly, carefully, quietly, I move out of the patchy moonlight to the next branch over, cloaking myself in shadow. What is he doing out here with Imogen? Are they lovers? Friends? It's absolutely none of my business, and yet I can't help but wonder if she's the kind of woman he goes for. One whose beauty is only outmatched by her brutality. They fucking deserve each other. It's so bad. So I've mentioned already the fact that she's a meek, bookish little introvert. I just want to be a scribe. I just want to sit and read. Oh my god, I love reading. I'm so bookish. But also, she's a complete horny freak whenever she feels like it. She's got a friend who's in the year above her. He's a guy and he wants to look out for her. They've known each other a long time, but obviously he's gonna get friend-zoned, which is a whole other issue. Like, I could talk about that forever. And she likes to flirt with him and tease him and talk about being a slut around him and all of this really toxic, awful 90s teenage sitcom drama kind of shit. So his name is Dane, and like, when he's showing her around the academy, he takes her to his room and they're standing outside the door, and she makes jokes about going into his room with him and making moaning sounds because it would be funny. It's like, oh, I could throw in a few "oh, Danes" just for a laugh. Isn't she so quirky? Up until this point, she has been a meek, nervous, bookish thing who likes to hide away in the corners of libraries and stay out of everyone's trouble. And now she's like, hey, we could go into your bedroom and just make moaning sounds. That would freak everyone out. Wouldn't that be funny? And she does it again on page 56. Dane comes along and he says, no one tried to screw with you last night, right? And there's a kind of clever conflation here, right? Between screw with and screw. You know, that with is doing a lot of heavy lifting. And she says, would it be so bad if they did? Oh my god, she's such a tease. She's so naughty. Except when she's a prudish bookworm, you know. She is what she wants to be whenever she wants to be. Character consistency? What is that? We don't need that in this book, thank you very much. Now, I do think there is a competency to the writing here, and again, I think the editor did a lot of good work. This book is paced well, it is fluid, it flows really nicely, but one of the most egregiously terrible aspects to the writing are the constant one-word sentences, where to really emphasize something, you'll have a line, and that line will be made up of 5 one-word sentences with a full stop after each word. And you get the very best one on page 90, where she says, "It's all I can do to smother my gasp, and some of the others in the group don't bother trying. What a dick." These lists of one-word sentences happen, I'd say, every like 3 pages. It is so egregious, it is so cringe, I could barely stomach it. Also, around the page 100 mark, there is constant talk about Zaden handling her, and how crazy horny that clearly makes her feel. He talks about handling her, and she's like, "Oh, handle me. Oh, he's gonna handle..." This guy's dangerous. He's really abusive and scary. "Oh, he's gonna handle me. Oh, handle me." But at first, she doesn't like the handling until she does. Until she starts to flirt with it. But at first, she says, "He'll handle me." My muscles thaw with the heat of indignation. I'm not some inconvenience to be handled. My short-lived admiration of Zaden is over until it's not. On page 93, she tries to do some kind of metatextual thing here by being very tongue-in-cheek and aware of the tropes of the genre that she's writing in. But that is not a get-out-of-jail-free card. Just because you're aware of tropes and aware of the fact that you're leaning into those tropes doesn't mean you just get to do it and make what you think is a good book. This guy has some kind of magic power that allows him to manipulate shadows. Once you bond with a dragon, it gives you a unique power of your own, and of course his is about shadows because he's so dark and mysterious. And while she's hidden and listening to this group of rebels chat, he finds her. And she says, "How did you know?" My tone is outright indignant, but whatever. If he's gonna kill me, I'm not going down as some simpering little beggar. Let me guess, you could smell my perfume. Isn't that always what gives the heroine away in books? He scoffs. "I command shadows, but sure, it was your perfume that gave you away." "I command shadows." And then on the same page, just a few lines under that, he legitimately gives her a threat, which somehow turns her on, because of course it does, but yeah, sure. He says, "What? Itos hasn't warned you not to get caught alone in the dark with me yet?" And instead of being like, "Oh my god, red flag, run away, this guy is scary and dangerous," it says, "His voice is like rough velvet along my skin and I shiver." Oh, Jesus Christ. After a little bit more banter between this potential rapist and his victim, he says, "Fascinating. You look all frail and breakable, but you're really a violent little thing, aren't you?" An appreciative smile curves his perfect lips as shadows dance upon the trunk of the oak, taking the form of fingers. They pluck the daggers from the tree and bring them to Zaden's waiting hands. What? Chapter 8 actually opens with a random assumption that if you're not in your room, that means you're having sex with someone. There can't be anything else. I take the dragon scale vest from where I left it to dry on the hanger at the end of my bed and slip it over my short sleeve black shirt. It's a good thing I've gotten pretty adept at tightening the laces behind my back since Rhiannon isn't in her bed. At least one of us is getting a few much needed orgasms. Like what? Also, can we talk about the idea that orgasms only come from men? Like, how is Rhiannon supposed to get an orgasm unless she goes and fucks a guy? It's impossible. Men are the answer to all your problems. Don't forget it. Rebecca Yarros won't. One of my notes says page 105 is hilarious, and I have no idea why. Oh, it's the dragon bit. Okay, so... If you haven't read this book, I want you to predict what's gonna happen based on this description, okay? So as I said, every dragon rider gets to bond with their own dragon. One thing I really like about the book is the fact that these dragons are presented as very dangerous things. They are intelligent, and they see humans as completely inferior, just a tool for them to use, a convenience that happens to be there, and the bond helps the dragons, and they go, okay, well, I guess I'll let a human ride me because the magic that the bond provides is useful to us and blah blah blah. I quite like the way the dragons are depicted. Their whole attitude to humans is great. There's actually a genuinely good moment later on where Violet and a group of other potential riders are around the dragons. One of them badmouths a dragon and gets burned to a crisp. And another character is like, wow, we really don't matter. I thought it was a really powerful moment. I genuinely loved that. The idea that Violet and all the other humans just don't actually matter. The dragons are bigger and stronger, more capable, more intelligent. This moment of self-awareness, of feeling so small in the face of something so big, it takes away all of that self-insert protagonist, better than everyone else, smarter and funnier and prettier and blah blah. All that stuff goes away when you're face to face with a dragon. I thought it was pretty cool. But the dragons come in different colors. Not only that, but they have differently shaped tails. And the tails are named after weapons. So you get a blue dagger tail. Okay, that sounds kind of cool. Fine. Then you get a red sword tail, which is actually quite hard to say. Sword tail. Doesn't roll off the tongue very well. And then there's the black dragon. And there are only like 2 of them because, you know, they're the biggest and best of them all. They're really rare and it's like a video game. You got the rare black dragon. What tail do these have? Dagger tail? Sword tail? Club tail? No. Morning star tail. Like, yeah, I know, I get it. A morning star is a weapon, but morning star tail is the dumbest name. What was she thinking? Morning star tail. Anyway, I did say predict what's gonna happen. Okay, so black dragon, super rare. The head of the military has a black dragon, and there is one other black dragon that the humans know about. Just the one. Who do you think is gonna get the black dragon? Take a wild guess. And they really lean into that as well. What about the black dragon the first year next to Jack asks? There's one here, right? Jack's face lights up. I want that one. Pfft, not that it's gonna matter. Professor Cowrie flicks his wrist and scale appears. Scale. This, by the way, is how scale is spelled. And you say it out loud and realize, oh, it's scale. You get Sorengale and scale. It's too much. And a massive black dragon takes her place. Even the illusion is bigger, making me crane my neck slightly to see its head. But just to appease your curiosity, since this is the only time you'll ever see him, here is the only other black dragon besides General Melgren's. You'll never see this dragon again. This is it. This is your only chance ever. But is it? I don't think it is somehow. Call me psychic. But there's just something telling me maybe the black dragon might show up again 100 pages from now for some reason. And then we get introduced to the gold dragon. I'm not joking. After they meet the dragons, Violet goes from being a meek thing whose bones break a lot because she has some kind of illness that is never explained, to being the best and smartest and fastest and strongest of all the fighters in the whole wide world somehow. She just keeps beating people over and over again. She has this one thing that she does where she darts behind someone and knocks the backs of their knees so they fall down and then everything's over. She does it like 3 times in a row, 3 fights in a row. She is suddenly so quick and so strong and so savvy, so intuitive when it comes to how to fight. She's just really great at everything. Because of course she is, because she's an author insert protagonist. And then when the flirting with Zaden really starts to ramp up, he gives her the nickname Violence because it sounds like Violet. It's not an offensive nickname. She gets so annoyed. He calls her Violence all the way through the book. It's not offensive. It's a cool nickname. And of course, Rebecca Yarros knows that. She knows it's a cool nickname. That's why she's done it. Oh, stop calling me Violence. It's so mean. I don't like it. So I haven't conveyed this very well, but for the first 100 pages of this book, it's pretty compelling. Like, I was relatively impressed. It felt very generic and there wasn't much world building, but the character writing and the events were all pretty solid. Crossing the parapet is exciting. I was interested to know what was going to happen next. But at the 100-page mark, it feels like there was a moratorium on good writing that just went out the window completely. From this moment on, Violet and Zaden are just flirting to their heart's content. Right up until the 100 100-page mark, this guy is deadly and dangerous. He wants to kill her. She stays out of his way. Every time she sees him coming, she runs off. He literally threatens to rape her. And then as soon as we get over 100 pages, the two of them start flirting in the most innocent and jovial way possible. It's so weird. On page 117, she feels sorry for herself and she says to him, I bet you'd rather I just died. And he goes, what? And miss the pleasure of your company? I'm like, what? It's a different book. This is now a different book. In one of my notes, I've just ordered myself to read the second half of page 118, so that's what I'm gonna do. Okay, so this is a fight scene. Catching his throat in the crook of my elbow, I squeeze. Instead of going for my arms, he twists, grabbing a hold of the backs of my thighs, so I lose my leverage and our bodies careen into a roll. He comes out on top. Of course he does. His forearm rests against my throat, not cutting off air, but definitely capable of it. And his hips have pinned mine, my legs useless on either side of his as he lies heavily between my thighs. He's unmovable. Everything around us fades as my world narrows to the arrogant glint in his gaze. He's all I can see, all I can feel, and I can't let him win. I slip one of my last daggers free and go for his shoulder. He seizes my wrist and pins it above my head. Shit, shit, shit! Heat rushes up my neck and flames lick my cheeks as he lowers his face so his lips are only inches away from mine. I can make out every speck of gold in his onyx eyes, every bump and ridge of his scar. Beautiful fucking asshole. I have to admit though, like that was a hot scene. Like she knew exactly what she was doing, we all do, and it kind of works. Like I can't deny that was quite hot. But of course she ruined it with the one sentence thing that she does at the end and the weird placement of because she doesn't know how to use it. Of course she ruins it at the very end there. Of course she had to. But it was hot for like a second. Now for the first half of the book, her friend Dane, who's just looking out for her, really wants to find an opportunity to get her out of the dragon riding division and into the scribes where she'll be safe. She has no reason not to. Her mum told her to, but now she's in the academy, she could just sneak off. And because Rebecca Yarros clearly couldn't think of a reason to keep her there, she just turns to Dane and is like, no, I'm not leaving. And Dane is like, why? What's changed? And she just goes, me. What? That's not enough of a reason, but yeah, sure, why not? I mean, we don't have world building. Why should we have character consistency? Now, I really don't want to talk about too much more of it because I'm getting into spoiling things here. But when she meets her dragon, and I'll let you guess which dragon is hers, it's very important to establish that this dragon is male, purely because the dragon treats her badly and patronizes her and is mean to her. So it's not so much implying that men are bad as it is implying that men are sexy and mean. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's horrible. Like, I don't know Rebecca Yarros, but I can't imagine that she's anything close to being a feminist. Because all the way through this book, the men who treat her kindly are basically punished for it. And the man who tries to and kill her, and the dragon that talks to her terribly, are rewarded by being flattered and described as attractive and cool. They are painted in a good light. And I know this is nothing new when it comes to this kind of fiction. Depicting men as toxic and abusive and painting that as a good thing is a trope of this genre. I know that. Doesn't mean I have to like it. But of course, the dragon talks to her terribly. All the men treat her like crap, but they also tell her that she's the best and the smartest of all of the people in the whole wide world. She's smarter than everyone, stronger than everyone, better than everyone at everything, but the men also need to treat her terribly just to make themselves look more attractive. So I knew that this book was going to be bad because it's been around for a while. I know the discourse, but also the fact that when you look at the back, the only 3 reviews that we get are from The Sun, The Daily Mail, and Millie Bobby Brown. Like, yeah, okay. That really points to this book being something special, doesn't it? Jesus Christ. But I had so much fun reading this book. God, I'm doing the one-word sentence thing now. It's really, really fun. There are books that are bad, and there are books that are so bad they're fun. This is one of them. Usually that kind of a thing is reserved for films. Like, I watch a lot of films that are so bad they're good. This is the first time I've had that happen with a book, where it's genuinely terrible from page 1, but I'm having a blast all the way through. It is so entertaining. Not in the way that Yoros intends, not at all, but that doesn't matter. This is my copy. If I want to laugh all the way through at every single thing she tries to do that might sound cool or edgy or interesting or sexy, that's my prerogative. This thing is dreadful and I loved every page. I laughed out loud constantly. I'm really glad I read this. What a dreadful thing. I really hope you enjoyed this. If you had fun watching this video, I'd really appreciate your support on Patreon or as a channel member. You can become a member of the channel or a member of my Patreon. Either way, I would really, really appreciate your support. Don't read this and subscribe for books.